Good morning. Welcome back to Booker-Milhorn Documentary Talk. I'm your host, Caroline Milhorn, and today we will take the audience back to a time period to analyze a period in history that is well known, this period being Nazi Germany and Hitler's rise to power. For today's segment, the main goal that we hope to provide to the viewer is how Hitler became well known and essentially what helped him rise to power. The question that this documentary segment will answer is as follows. How did Nazi propaganda play a role in promote Hitler's rise to power? And how did propaganda create a figure of Hitler that Germans would accept and promote? From our analysis, part of the reason that Hitler was able to become so successful in the beginning years of his reign was in fact because of propaganda tactics, and we hope to explore this historical concept in depth throughout the segment. The source that we will discuss is the power and knowledge of Nazi propaganda creators. From Holocaust Encyclopedia, this website stated, the Nazis effectively used propaganda to win the support of millions of Germans in a democracy, and later in a dictatorship to facilitate persecution, war, and ultimately genocide. From our research here at Booker-Milhorn Documentary Talk, we found that Nazi propagandists were skillful and creative at advertising to promote better messages when it especially came to Hitler. Now to Terrence Booker, our media and interview specialist with primary research from this period of Nazi Germany.
Thank you, Caroline. Today I'm sitting here with Ella Castor-Waters, a historian who is known for her research on Adolf Hitler. Part of Ella's work has been to analyze different leaders and quotes from German citizens. Could you offer a few examples?
Of course. Thank you for having me on this segment. From my research, I found that Adolf Hitler was, for the most part, supported by Germany in the quotes from memorials of Nazi views placed on broad audiences. I'll share one example with you today. From Hans Hilbert, he stated, "I die gladly for my fatherland and for my Führer, Adolf Hitler."
Okay, thank you, Ella. Now back to you, Caroline.
Thank you, TJ. This statement, "I die gladly for my fatherland and for my Führer, Adolf Hitler," was stated by a Nazi German in 1932. Nazi propaganda began to rise in the 1920s, and many of the propaganda items reflected Hitler in a higher up position that reflects the fatherland. From German Propaganda Archive, the poster on the screen above translate "Führer, we will follow you." From our analysis, Hitler is depicted as a leader, standing tall and firm with citizens supporting him in the background, which influenced his rule in terms of support from the citizens. This connects to the quote by Hans, as seen by the historian Ella Castor-Waters, because Hitler has been seen as a leader of Germany and guiding the citizens to success. Our second interview is with Amanda Bailey, a historian who researched Hitler in many different areas. She shows us today a primary example of this. Now to TJ, who has this footage.
Thank you, Caroline, and thank you for being here today, Amanda. Would you please share your thoughts on the propaganda poster of 1936 in reference to Hitler's rise in Germany?
Yes, I have been researching Nazi propaganda, and I came to the conclusion that Hitler was also able to rise and stay in power for longer due to the propaganda because of the vast and distinct ways that Nazi propagandists represented him. And the first representation is seen from this poster that's titled "Adolf Hitler's Youth Attends Community Schools."
Thank you, Amanda. Now back to you, Caroline.
Thank you, TJ. From this propaganda poster depicted above, this representation shows that Nazi photos were also promoting Hitler in different ways, which also allowed more people to associate and connect with him in this period of history. The next analysis and interview comes from newspaper representation of this period as well. Now to TJ, who has this coverage.
Thank you, Caroline. I'm here today with Sydney Atkins, a historian who has researched about Adolf Hitler in relation to the press coverage of Nazi Germany, and she has willingly joined to talk and discuss the rise of Adolf Hitler's power, specifically from propaganda. Sydney, can you please share some information with us that you found in your research?
Yes, thank you for having me. From Facing History and Ourselves, the 1935 image from the German newspaper titled "The Attacker" shows how information was spread to citizens in Germany by placing information on the sidewalks. The image is in reference to the anti-Semitic propaganda that was seen in different newspapers, and citizens are reading it.
Thank you, Sydney. Now back to you, Caroline.
Thank you, TJ. It is always great to have guests that join our segments. To reflect on Sydney Attick's research from our analysis of the image shown above, this represents how our argument is to show that propaganda, even beyond poster creation, such as newspapers, also reinforce Hitler's ideas that show how propaganda was used to draw in support from German citizens for Hitler and especially Nazi ideas. Now to show a few clips from a film that was published in 1935 that relates to Nazi propaganda.
The film displayed Leni Riefenstahl's propaganda documentary titled Triumph of the Will of the Nuremberg Nazi Party rally of 1934. The movie was made in 1935 and shows how propaganda techniques were created and allowed another form of propaganda to suggest both Hitler's ideas to the German population. The film shows the use of many cameras, different angles of Hitler as shown by the cameras, as well as the creative editing done for this documentary film.
The film also reminded Germany about the World War and the suffering of Germany, but then displayed Hitler on the screen, which by our analysis was a creative method to associate the rebirth of Germany with Hitler specifically. From our argument, this film was shown to other countries to allow Nazi Germany to spread to foreign regions because it was showed to various areas and essentially showed how loved and supported Hitler was.
In the clip provided from Triumph of the Will, Hitler is being portrayed as a warm, inclusive leader. The dictator is being shown waving to a large crowd of onlookers, a majority of them screaming in excitement. Hitler is using a similar approach to what we see in modern-day politicians. In order to warm up to the public, outward displays of kindness such as kissing babies and shaking hands with the elderly will often do the trick. Propaganda during this time played a huge role in how politicians and other leaders of the world were portrayed. Because Hitler was only ever shown in a positive light, it was fairly predictable that he would earn a devoted following. Those who looked up to Hitler had been easily convinced that this welcoming facade truly portrayed who he was. This would curate the myth of Hitler wanting what was best for the people of Germany, when in fact there was something much more sinister at hand.
Another propaganda source was created in 1936, which we found throughout our research, and it seems to be showing that Hitler appeared to be like an angel that sprinkled gold dust behind him as he moved throughout Germany. For this image depicted above in the propaganda tactic, we see that it is important to review a time period that this is specifically set in. Because remember, Germany had just come out of World War I and was in constant despair and struggle. Most Germans wanted a savior, and Nazi propaganda allowed this to be achieved, as seen by the portrayal of the propaganda that was created in reference to Hitler that was saving Germany.
Final analysis comes from propaganda that we have found in an article that reads, Only Hitler. This shows the promotion that was created by Nazi propagandists that supported Hitler into power in 1932. This prompted Hitler to gather support that would result into his rise of power in 1933.
There are many different ways that Nazi propaganda tried to appeal to. A primary example would be the different ages that was displayed throughout propaganda techniques. The image shown above, titled Youth Serves the Führer, depicts a 10-year-old boy looking up to Hitler. The context for the specific poster in 1940 represented the membership that was also made and targeted to the youth of Germany. The context for this particular poster is also imperative to note. In the years that Nazism was rising in Germany, the image of Hitler tried to connect with the youth specifically. According to the direct quote by Adolf Hitler himself, where he states, "These boys and girls enter our organization at 10 years of age, and often for the first time get a little fresh air. And after 4 years of young folk, they go into the Hitler Youth." This shows Hitler's prime connection that he made, and according to many different ages, but the youth especially because they were the future of Germany. This poster is also a primary explanation for the propaganda techniques that added to Hitler's rise and reign, because Hitler, thanks to propaganda, was supported by many different ages of the German population.
While the propaganda shown previously represents Hitler, the German community, and the connection or unity of the region, the 1940 time period of Nazi Germany focused on the war because Hitler was planning to attack other regions and World War II had begun. As the viewer could see, the themes of the various propaganda posters and films shown on the screen revealed that there are multiple forms of propaganda that were dependent on the time period. For example, propaganda posters that were created in the 1940s represent German war efforts, including the image shown on the screen. That, by our analysis, represents a soldier with the Nazi German flag behind him with the words, "The victory will be ours," which shows the propaganda depicted Germany as winning. However, we know that in modern day, Germany did not win World War II, but Nazi propaganda posters intentionally wanted to increase war by Hitler's efforts. In the later periods of 1943, Germany began to lose the war, but the propaganda reflected hope and support for Germany, which shows how propaganda impacted Germany so much, because propagandists knew how to appeal the needs for Germans.
Overall, by this analysis from Booker-Milhorn documentary talk, the question of how did Nazi propaganda play a role and promote Hitler's rise to power, and how did propaganda create a figure of Hitler that Germans would accept and promote, was essentially answered and explained. This has been answered by looking at the various forms of propaganda that targeted different groups, ages, and efforts. The dramatized and overproduction of support for Hitler that was filmed, as seen by the movie Triumph of the Will, was used to promote Hitler's rule because it was to connect Germany with different parts or countries to expand German efforts, which was a prime goal of Adolf Hitler. Secondly, the main goal of Nazi propaganda was to create the image of Hitler to reflect what Germany needed in order to promote Germans to accept and place Hitler into power. This is seen by Hitler's representation as a savior to pull Germany out of the hopelessness that it was in. This shows overall how Hitler's rise to power was an important period of history, and furthermore, a large part of his rise and power came from the propaganda of the period of Nazi Germany. Thank you for tuning in. See you next week.